When you teach something, very oftentimes people will come up to you after the class and say, "Oh my gosh, when you said blank, that really cracked it open for me." And
Yeah.
Yeah.
and oftentimes I'm like, "Did I say that? I don't remember saying that." So after a while, I started keeping track of what people were saying. The most common one that people still come back to me with and say, "Wow, 10 years later, I'm still thinking about that," is that we judge ourselves by our intentions and other people judge us by our behaviors.
Our guest is Margaret Andrews, speaker, author, and educator. She shares her insights about one of the most essential elements of great leadership. Join us for episode 411 of Growth Igniters Radio with Pam Harper and Scott Harper.
This episode is brought to you by Business Advancement Incorporated, enabling successful leaders and companies to accelerate to their next level of success. On the web at businessadvance.com. And now, here's Pam and Scott.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Pam Harper, founding partner and CEO of Business Advancement Incorporated. And right alongside with me, as always, is my business partner and husband, Scott Harper.
Hi, everybody. It's wonderful to be with you again. And as always, our purpose here is to ignite new insights, inspiration, and immediately useful ideas to help visionary leaders ignite game-changing innovation, transformation, and growth. And of course, great leadership is the foundation for this kind of growth.
Now, listeners, we know you know a lot about leadership.
That's right. And yet, despite everybody's best intentions, it can be challenging to apply that knowledge on a daily basis.
Yeah, we've seen that the most successful leaders continuously develop themselves as people and as leaders.
That's right.
And someone else who's seen this is our guest today, Margaret Andrews. She's a speaker, author, and educator with over 30 years of experience at the highest echelons of business and higher education. Margaret has taught on 4 continents and held multiple key leadership roles at Harvard and MIT. She's also the founder of the MYLO Center, Managing Yourself and Leading Others, a leadership education and professional development firm. She's author of the book, Manage Yourself to Lead Others, Why Great Leadership Begins with Self-Understanding. And she also writes for many publications, including, it's Fast Company, Leader the Leader, and Psychology Today.
I know.
You can read much more about Margaret Andrews by going to growthignitersradio.com, episode 411, and scrolling down to the bio link in resources. Margaret, welcome to Growth Igniters Radio.
Great. Thank you for having me and that wonderful introduction.
Yes, we've been wanting to talk with you for quite a while. And this issue of leadership, you think, well, we all know leadership, right? And yet at the same time, it's hard to apply on a daily basis.
Education can outstrip practice.
Yeah. So
Yes.
you came up with this book, and I think it's great for people who are watching, listening, to get a little more of a sense of what influenced you to write the book at this time.
I actually never really set out to write a book. The book came much later. So what originally started the whole thing was my own leadership foibles. Let's say that. Many years ago, I was leading a large team, and my boss, who I had a difficult relationship with, told me in very uncertain terms, he said, "You are not self-aware." And it was not said in a, "Oh, let me help you with this" kind of way. It was said in a "you are broken and can't be fixed" kind of way.
Ooh.
So yes, I oftentimes say to people that really great gifts can come in ugly packages. And that was a good example of that. So, I didn't want to be that leader, because I looked around and I realized, in many respects, he's right. That, I didn't have a great relationship with him. And there were some people on my team that I'm just going to say were kind of afraid of me. And that was not what I wanted. So I started doing a lot of research into, what makes you a better leader. And I really kept coming up on many of the same ideas that all led to the idea that you have to understand and manage yourself first. And so I created a class at Harvard, and it's been going for almost 20 years.
Wow.
Oh,
And
congratulations.
thank you. And then, an executive program, and I created a speech. And I think the next, each one has a certain, the class, we had like 36 people. And then the executive program, you can teach, a couple thousand. The
Uh-huh.
speech, you get more, and the book more. So I think it
Mm.
was just these concentric circles of saying, okay, what's next with this idea? Because
So
it
it
keeps
really was a
resonating.
gift. It really was a gift.
It was a gift. It sure didn't feel like it in the moment, but it was.
Okay, so you're not self-aware.
Yeah, but do you think, Margaret, that along with it being a gift to you, that this time in the world also lends itself to a book like this?
Yeah, I mean, I think leadership is one of those things that we think we understand what it is, but until you're in a leadership position yourself, it is so much harder than it looks or
Uh-huh.
sounds, right? We all know that when you
We
get
do.
promoted your first time and you think,
Uh-huh.
oh, I'm going to do it totally differently when I'm up
Uh-huh.
there.
Uh-huh.
And then you get there and realize, oh my goodness, this is so much harder than it looks. And,
Yeah.
right. And things I didn't know.
It's like
So,
patting your head and rubbing your tummy, right?
exactly.
So we have this gap between knowledge
Mm,
and behavior.
yeah.
And so why?
Mm,
Especially, and we've seen this over and over again, especially when
absolutely.
the pressure is on. Why and what are the consequences of that?
Yeah, when you teach something, very oftentimes people will come up to you after the class and say, "Oh my gosh, when you said blank, that really cracked it open for me." And
Yeah.
Yeah.
and oftentimes I'm like, "Did I say that? I don't remember saying that." So after a while, I started keeping track of what people were saying. The most common one that people still come back to me with and say, "Wow, 10 years later, I'm still thinking about that," is that we judge ourselves by our intentions and
Uh-huh.
other people judge us by our behaviors. And
Mhm.
I think
Oh,
that just
yeah.
sums up just what we're talking about
Yeah.
here is that I intend to be a good leader. I intend to be a good teammate.
Sure.
All of
Mhm.
these, or parent,
Sure.
use that one too. And
Sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
right? They're similar. But, if my behaviors don't match that, what happens is that the leader, the parent, whatever it is, still is very misunderstood because what they
Mhm.
think they're putting out there is not being received in the way
Mhm.
that they think it should be received, and they feel very misunderstood. And by the way, they don't get the results they're looking for either.
Mhm.
So that's that idea, Scott, of kind of, that's we understand we should be listening to people and delegating well and all of these things we do
Right.
as
Right.
leaders,
Right.
but knowing something and actually doing it are different things,
Oh,
right?
that's true.
So
There's
why?
Yeah.
Why is that a difference there?
Yeah, I think part of it is what you mentioned is when we get under pressure and
Uh,
stress, right? And that, welcome to the real world, right? That happens all the time. But the other, I think that's part of it is that we have a fear of vulnerability.
uh,
Mm.
And when we're learning some new behaviors or skills, we make a lot of mistakes. And so
Mhm.
people don't like to be vulnerable. And as you go up in levels of an organization, more people see you make mistakes as you're
Uh-huh.
learning something new, and people don't like that. So they oftentimes, think, well, this is what got me here. I'm not going to worry about it.
yeah.
And we all know what happens then.
Sure. And I think the other thing is that none of us ever set out to say, I'm going to come in and really wreak havoc today. Yeah.
I wanna make people mad.
Yeah. Well,
Exactly.
I did have one supervisor who bragged about making men cry. So,
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
but other
Yeah.
than that,
Yeah. Yeah.
yes. Yeah, that's an interesting thing to brag about. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we come to work in all different ways for sure. But so you have this through line. We spoke with you, of course, before today, and your book goes to this too. This whole idea of the subtitle of your book, Why Great Leadership Begins with Self Understanding.
Mm.
And maybe I'm stealing your thunder here, but
Mm.
it means so much, and I believe it too. But talk about that a little bit.
I may be having a bad day, but that doesn't give me license to yell at you or to be mean and nasty or these kinds of things, right? So I have to
Mhm.
manage my own bad mood, if you wanna call it that. So, but the thing is that we have to understand ourselves before we can manage
uh,
ourselves. And right, because you can't manage something you don't understand. And so we think we understand ourselves, but in reality, we oftentimes don't. And so, I have these 6 questions that I can share with all of you that really get to the heart of who are you and how are you shaped as a leader? Because I've always believed that context is hugely important, right? The answer to any question may be different on Monday and Tuesday because the context is different, right? And so we
Yes.
we grow up, we have all these influences on our lives, people and ideas and teachers and they all give us a sense for ourselves, who we are, what we're good at, and our place in the world. And I think a lot of times we outgrow those. Or as some people have said, they were never true in the first place.
That's true.
Oh,
There's the
ouch.
stories we tell ourselves that don't necessarily match with reality.
Exactly,
Uh-huh.
exactly.
Well,
Yeah.
and it's like wearing clothes that don't fit anymore.
Right.
I
Uh-huh.
use that example all the time. It's like the
Yes.
itchy sweater, right?
Yes.
You're just
Yes.
pulling at it and everything.
You
Yes.
know, I'm 3 sizes larger, but I'm going, hey, it's
Yes. Oh, I've never done that. I've never done that.
well, this is a good place for us to take a quick break, and that's what we're going to do. And when we come back, we'll dig deeper with speaker, educator, and author Margaret Andrews. She shares a story that brings to life why great leadership begins with self-understanding. Stay with us.
This is Growth Igniters Radio with Pam Harper and Scott Harper. We're brought to you by Business Advancement Incorporated, and we're on the web at businessadvance.com.
Well, here we are. We are in our 12th year of Growth Igniters Radio,
Yeah.
and we're continuing to gain recognition as a top podcast. We've been honored by Thinkers 360 Thought Leaders and Popcorn Podcast Awards, and we're also ranked in the top 5% of global podcasts by the podcast database Listen Notes. Now, listeners and viewers tell us that they enjoy our conversations with visionary CEOs and thought leaders like Margaret Andrews, who are changing the face of business. They also really enjoy our Pam and Scott Quick Take episodes.
They do. And if you're enjoying our podcast, help us out. Become a recommender. Just open the podcast on whatever app you use and write a review. And be sure to share links to your favorite episode, maybe this one, on your social media.
And remember, Growth Igniters Radio is only one of the ways we help top leadership teams ignite game-changing innovation and transformational growth. Curious about how we can help you with your company? Well, let's talk. Visit businessadvance.com today and schedule a call with us. Welcome back to Growth Igniters Radio with Pam Harper. That's me, and Scott Harper. Today, Scott and I are speaking with Margaret Andrews, author of the book Manage Yourself to Lead Others, about her insights on why great leadership begins with self-understanding. Margaret, tell us about how people can find out about you, your book, where to buy that, and, of course, anything else you want to share with us.
Great. Really, the only social media I use is LinkedIn. You can find me there. You can also find me on my website, which is margaretandrews.com. That's fairly straightforward.
Okay. And you can find links to Margaret's 6 questions for management and other links for this episode by going to growthignitersradio.com, episode 411, and then scrolling down under resources. In the first segment, we spoke about Margaret's reasons for writing this book, Manage Yourself to Lead Others. And it turns out that sometimes some of the gifts that we get aren't always wrapped in beautiful wrapping paper, but they give us lessons. And so Margaret was sharing some of the lessons she learned, and specifically this gap that can often come up between knowing that you know so much about leadership and yet on a daily basis, it can be hard, like patting the head and rubbing the tummy. But Margaret has some ways to help us through this, and continuous development as leaders is, I think, one of the most essential things we can do for ourselves.
Absolutely.
So, Margaret, let's go back. You were about to share a story that can kind of illustrate, really bring to life this concept of the knowing and the doing gap.
Yeah. There was many years ago when I was teaching an executive program, and we were talking about this case about Dr. Ventura. And Dr. Ventura is a surgeon a very, very good surgeon.
Now, is
with
this a real person
It
or just a thing?
actually well, it's a disguised case, right? It
Okay.
is a real
Okay.
person in a
All right.
real situation, but the names were changed
Okay,
and
so
things.
drawn from real life. All right.
Drawn
Okay.
from real life. And the case is about Dr. Ron Ventura, this gifted surgeon who has terrible interpersonal skills.
Hmm.
So, right, really good at the surgery and things like
Uh-huh.
this, but yelling at people in the operating theater, bullying people outside, talking about others, not what you really want. And
Right.
so, in the case, we're taking the perspective of Dr. Ventura's boss, a hospital administrator, and we're trying to figure out what do we do with this guy.
Uh,
He's got great patient outcomes, raising revenue, reputation of the hospital, et cetera.
Mhm.
On the other hand, we're having higher turnover because he's such a bully,
Mhm.
and morale is going down. So we've got this, two-sided thing.
Right. He's the
And
star,
oh,
yeah, but
he's
there's
the
a
this.
quintessential star. I've seen so many of those
yeah.
over the course of my
Yes.
career. Yes.
There's lots of them out there, and they're not just all surgeons either.
Yeah, right. That's what I'm saying. I don't work in the same fields as that, but I will tell you that I have seen any number of these star employees, and it's such a dilemma for any
It
leadership
is a
team. Say, what do you
huge
do?
dilemma. It is because you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't,
Yes.
Right.
kind of thing, right? And so, in fact, I always say to people, if you haven't had a Ron Ventura in your life, you probably will, and it is one
Mhm.
of the hardest situations you'll ever find yourself in leadership.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so, in this case discussion, we're talking about, well, what do we do with him? Do we keep him and try to coach him and, these things, or do we get
Mhm.
rid of him, because he's really causing a lot of problems?
Yeah.
And so it's a very spirited discussion. And as we're closing down the discussion, I notice this hand raised in the back of the room, and it's James, and he has not talked the whole 2 days we've been together. So of course I call on him, and he says from the back of the room, he says, "I'm Dr. Ventura." And everybody, yes, they had the same reaction that you did, right? You could
Yeah.
see it. That
Yeah.
it's just like on TV where everyone turned around at the
Uh-huh.
same time and
Uh-huh.
they're all staring at him. And then he realizes what he said, and he said, "Oh, I'm not the real Dr. Ventura." He said, "I'm an engineer, not a surgeon." But he said,
Okay.
the rest of that case could have been written about me. He
Wow.
said, "I'm a really, really good engineer," but he said, "I've been a terrible teammate and manager." And he said, "That's why I'm here." He said, "I was
Uh-huh.
recently
Mhm.
passed over for a promotion, and essentially, if I don't fix this, I'm probably going to be fired." And so, he was at a kind of a crisis point.
Uh-huh.
And I will tell you, he took it seriously, and
Good.
he kept in touch, and within, I think it was a year, maybe it was 2 years, he got that promotion. With the next 4 years, got 2 more promotions. So
Wow.
he took it seriously. And this is, I think, very common with very smart, very high achieving people.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, did he get a coach? I mean, how did he get through that? Well, he got the awareness, which is critical, but how did he actually do this
Do the transformation.
transformation?
So I actually don't know whether he got a coach, but it would not surprise me because, as you know, when you're really trying to fix some things like this and,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
alter some of your behaviors and things like that, it does help to have a coach. But
Yeah.
he came back for another program that I teach in
Uh-huh.
emotional intelligence, and
Ah,
when
so
he
he's
walked in,
a learner.
yeah, and it was so funny because he walked in the room. He goes, "Do you remember me?" And I said, "Oh yes." I said, "I will never forget you." Right?
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
it was the bravest thing I've ever heard anybody say in a classroom.
Yeah.
That he was
Students
saying,
like that are such
yeah,
a reward. Oh my goodness.
yeah. And
Yes.
also everybody in the class learned so much.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And he told me later, he said, I really debated whether I should, raise my hand and say that. And he said, I could barely listen to the case because I was so nervous
Mhm.
about doing it. But
Oh.
he did. And you know what? He was really helpful to everybody in that room.
This shows how just something that breaks through our
Mm.
crust and goes, "Oh, th that can be a turning point," and turn the
Yes.
story around.
Right.
I can do this a different way.
And there are a couple of
Yeah.
other things too. I think it takes tremendous courage
Oh, yeah.
Mhm,
to be able
mhm.
to do that. And, kudos to Dr. Ventura, the person in your class.
The engineering Dr.
The engineering
Ventura.
Dr. Right. To be able to do that and to recognize that, because a lot of times people go into self-denial. I've seen it. We've seen it when we've worked with people. I remember one case where somebody was really hungry to find out what his executive team thought of him. And when he got the feedback, it was very tough for him. And he was crushed.
Yeah.
And he was able to turn around too. But that willingness to find out, and like
Yeah.
you did,
Yeah.
to find out, self-awareness is part of it, but the willingness, the commitment to finding out.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
and to
suppose-
hearing it. And to
Yes.
hearing it. I think that's the other
Listening
thing.
to it.
Listening,
Yes.
exactly.
As
Yeah.
opposed to the person who says, I'm either a bad leader or you're incompetent. I choose you.
I think that's very common.
Yeah.
Yeah, right? But I always say, yeah, but what's the common thread here? Right?
Uh-huh.
All those threads lead back to you.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
But
So
you're right.
self-awareness is such a gift. And
Yes.
it's a starting point. And we're going to leave it at that, but we are going to move to the next section, and we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk more with Margaret Andrews, speaker, author, educator, about 3 immediately useful ideas for you to begin to build your own self-awareness about being a great leader, continuing to develop yourself as a great leader. Stay with us.
You're listening to Growth Igniters Radio with Pam Harper and Scott Harper. We're brought to you by Business Advancement Incorporated, where we focus on enabling visionary leaders to dramatically ignite momentum for game-changing results. We're on the web at businessadvance.com.
Have you ever wondered if so many top leaders believe that it's important to lead for business transformation and long-term growth in this rapidly changing world? Why can it be so challenging to break what I call the orbit of the status quo? That's where you're busy, you're in this year's cycle, but you're not really focused on what it takes to move forward, go beyond that. And as an author and advisor to top leadership teams focused on growing their companies into the future, that was the questions that set me on a long search for answers. So, what's the secret of the great leaders, in addition to everything else we're talking about? The ones who are able to bring a bold, transformational vision to life, even as the world keeps changing? That's what I share in my keynote, Break Orbit, Achieving Long-Term Growth in a Short-Term World.
Go to PamHarperSpeaks.com today to find out more about Pam's keynote and her availability to speak at your next leadership conference or executive retreat.
Welcome back to Growth Igniters Radio with Pam Harper and Scott Harper. Over the last 2 segments, Scott and I have been having a conversation with Margaret Andrews, author of the book Manage Yourself to Lead Others. Margaret, remind us how people can find out more about you, where they can find you, where they can find that book, and start getting more self-aware.
Great. I would say the book, Manage Yourself to Lead Others, is available where lots of books are sold, especially online and most of your favorite places. You can find me on LinkedIn, or you can find me on my website, which is margaretandrews.com.
And you can find more information and links for this episode by going to growthignitersradio.com, episode 411, and scrolling down to resources.
And one of those resources will be a link to the 6 questions that Margaret referred to earlier. You can download and look at that.
Yes. So now we are at the part of our episode where we talk about 3 immediately useful, tangible ideas to make these ideas come alive for you. And in this case, Margaret, you have 3 questions that you were telling us about. Let's discuss them in a little more tangible way. What's the first one?
All right. The first question is, what type of leader are you? Right. So this is, what type of leader are you now? And these are words and phrases that you would use to describe yourself as a leader. These are the good things, the things you're very proud of. And these are also the things you're not so proud of, right? So
Ah,
it's balanced, but it
okay.
also includes the words and phrases that you think other people use
Uh,
about you behind closed doors, or that
Uh-huh.
you can pull this off performance reviews or team feedback sessions or things like that. So it's really all around, what type of leader am I now? What words and phrases really capture that?
Mhm.
and this can be private. You don't have to share this with others. So if you
Right.
can't be honest with
Absolutely.
yourself, why bother?
Well, that's right. And so what you can
Exactly.
do, an immediately useful idea here too, is you can sit if you're on the plane, for example, we know a lot of people listen on the plane. You can sit with a glass of wine and
It helps.
Yeah, or a bourbon.
right, right. And you could have a sheet of paper or you could go onto your laptop, obviously. And you can have a column on the positive side and on the side that you have to touch, which is the I don't really
Yeah.
wanna think about it, but I must.
So that's a starting point.
Yeah, so that's the kind of the baseline, but the first question. And then the second question is, what type of leader would you like to become?
Ah.
And these are the words and the phrases you would like to be able to use, and you would like other people to use. Many of them may be the same,
Mhm.
as what you are now. You're probably not going to start all over, right? You're going to start from your own experience. So the second
Right.
question, but I will say, with especially the first question, don't edit it. As those words are coming out of your head, let them flow down your arm and through your pencil or pen. You can always edit later. Just don't edit too soon, right? Because
Yeah.
a word may come out. You're like, "Oh, I don't like that word." Well, you know what? It came out of your head, so
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
go ahead
Dirtbag.
and put
Yeah.
it down.
Right,
Yes, yes,
right.
yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Uh,
For the person who would like a little more specific guidance. I mean, we have vague ideas sometimes. People will
mm.
tell me, "I have a vague idea," but how can we make it a little more tangible for people who are a little more
Yeah.
concrete thinkers?
I'm a huge believer in lists and writing things down, that we understand things differently when we write them down. And I will
Yep.
say write, right, with a pen or pencil
Yeah.
versus
Okay.
Absolutely.
typing. There's a lot of research around this, that we do it differently. It makes us think differently.
Absolutely.
And so what I say is, if you're not sure what the right word is, maybe it's tough, maybe it's demanding,
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
maybe it's a little jerky, or what, right? These are all variations of the same word. Go ahead and write down any one of the ones that comes
Ah.
into your head, because
Mhm.
I also teach a class in creativity and innovation, and the idea is that once you put something down, a word out there on the paper, it makes you
Mhm.
think of others.
Yeah.
Right? And so
Aha. Yes.
it can be nuanced, because maybe
Mhm.
sometimes I am tough, and
Yeah.
sometimes I'm demanding, and sometimes I'm a little jerky, right? That
Mhm.
can all be true
Yeah.
in that. So
But there are
when
situations
yeah.
sometimes that call for some of that, and there are
Yes.
situations that call for something different.
Right.
And you have to be sensitive to when is this right and when is this wrong.
Exactly.
Oh,
And
you are so right on there, because leadership really depends on context. And
yes.
Mhm.
the conversation we have today will be different than the conversation we have tomorrow,
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
stuff happens in between,
Mhm.
right? And things change. So you're absolutely right.
Mhm.
Now, what's your thought about the impulse that some people like me might have to go to the internet and say, "Give me a list of attributes, the
Well, we've
good
got
bosses,
AI
good
now,
bad bosses."
Oh,
It
I
just have it
know, I
writing
know.
for you.
Is that well,
No,
you can pick
no.
it out. No?
Right.
No,
Right.
in fact,
Spontaneous.
a lot of times, people will do that with things around values, right?
Yeah,
Here's a
Mhm.
yeah,
list of
yeah.
100 values. Which seven are, the top ones for you? And I always say, oh, I think that's the wrong way to do it, because you could
Mhm.
pick any of
Yeah,
those 100 attributes. And I would say, do it from the inside. What comes up? What comes
more
up?
authentic.
And what stories do you have to back
Yeah,
that up?
yeah.
Right? It
Mhm.
might be that, maybe I had a conversation with the both of you last week, and maybe one of you said, wow, she's kind of demanding, and the other one of you
Uh-huh.
said, she's kind of a jerk, right?
Right.
Because the way you present will impact different people differently
Yeah.
Mhm.
as well. So
Right. Well,
yeah.
that's true in different cultures too. One of the things that
Mm.
I've seen over the course of working with people is that in one culture, you're seen as demanding and maybe high level. You're bringing out the best in people. In another culture, you're
Yeah.
intimidating. And so it
Absolutely.
really gets to how you might begin to think about what type of environment
Yeah.
Oh,
you would want to
so
be.
true, right?
Yeah.
Same behavior interpreted completely differently.
Exactly.
Yeah, and this goes actually back, Pam, to like this whole idea of self-understanding.
Uh-huh.
Is because I have something that I also say a lot in class, and that is that you should plant yourself where you're going to grow. Right?
Yes.
Think of
Uh-huh.
yourself like a plant.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes you need more or less sunlight, or more or less water, or whatever, and
Uh-huh.
sometimes you need new soil.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Those are
but
all things to think about.
I'm a
yeah.
gardener, and you touch my heart. It's
Okay, now
spring.
we get off into the gardening land.
The third.
So we've got 2 of these immediately
2,
useful
yes.
ideas.
That's the third.
What's the
Yeah.
third one?
So the first one, right, is what type of leader are you
Right.
now? The second one is what type of leader would you like to become? And the third question is, all right, what's the delta? Right? What's the
Uh-huh.
difference between this leader you want to become and the leader you are now? And so this gives you the idea of, okay, what would I need to work on? What
Yeah.
behaviors might I want to alter? Lots of times you will hear people say, what should I start doing? What should I stop doing?
Right.
What should I continue? This is a great, way of figuring that out. So
Yeah.
maybe you want to listen better. Maybe you want to become a better speaker. Maybe you want to, be more clear in how you describe whatever it
Uh-huh.
is. That comes out in that third question, but you have to answer the other 2 well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Honestly,
Yeah.
I would say.
Honestly, yes.
And you can do that in real time too, because sometimes you'll say, when someone does this or doesn't do this or says that, all of a sudden I get triggered. I do something that I don't really
Yes.
want to do. And if you note that after that meeting or whatever, you can say, hey, add that to the Delta list.
Right, and the other way to think about it is that this is all around self-management, right?
Yes.
Is
Mhm.
is understanding, how do I want to show up? How
Right.
do I want to behave? And guess what? We're going to
Mhm.
make mistakes left, right, and center as we're learning this new skill
Mhm.
or behavior. But that's part of the learning.
Yeah.
You just
Yeah.
if you want to learn to ride a bike, you got to get on a bike. You're
Mhm.
going to fall and brake incorrectly and all that kind of stuff, but there's no other way to learn it, and the same is true of behaviors.
Be
And
generous to yourself.
yes,
Yeah.
and I think
Yeah.
the good news is that once you have that self-awareness, there are all kinds of ways that you can begin to work on it, which we can talk about another time, I hope. But here we are at the end of the episode. Can you leave us with a final thought about increasing this self-understanding to grow as a leader?
I would go back to something I said earlier, which I think is really the crux of it, and that is that just remember that you judge yourself by your intentions, other people judge you by your behaviors.
Yeah.
And if you feel misunderstood, it's probably indicative of a mismatch.
Okay. Well, Margaret, thank you so much for being our guest on Growth Igniters Radio.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a real
Oh,
pleasure.
It has been delightful, Margaret. And thanks to all of you out there who are listening to Growth Igniters Radio. To contact us, get show notes and resource links like that list of 6 questions that Margaret mentioned, and even schedule a call with us, go to growthignitersradio.com and select episode 411.
Until next time, this is Pam Harper,
And Scott Harper.
wishing you continued success and leaving you with this question to think about and act upon. Starting today, how can I apply the insights from this conversation you've just listened or watched so I can keep growing as a person and as a leader?
Growth Igniters and Growth Igniters Radio with Pam Harper and Scott Harper are registered service marks of Business Advancement Incorporated. All Growth Igniters Radio episodes are copyrighted productions of Business Advancement Incorporated, intended for the private use of our audience. Except as otherwise provided by copyright law, all other uses including copying, editing, redistribution, and publication without prior written consent of Business Advancement Incorporated are prohibited. All rights reserved.